Hello there. The European Union is now like a lump of wood, with dry rot spreading in from both ends. Firstly, please subscribe and like this video to give my channel a boost, and I'm always uploading new content, so please do check back daily. The EU is now under threat from two different directions, one from the people and another from the very legal system that holds it together. The first threat comes from the people of Italy, who it seems are increasingly in favour of exiting the bloc. Italexit could well be on the cards. And the second threat comes from the German Constitutional Court in Karlsruhe that says it can overrule the European Court of Justice, something that actually seems to be gaining more credence with every day that passes. I've talked about this one before, but things are moving quite fast. And the real problem for Brussels is that the two threats are intertwined with each other. Because the overriding cause of Italian discontent with the EU stems from their belief that some EU member state countries like Germany have thrown them to the wolves by not helping them out financially in their moment of need, despite all being in the Eurozone together. But the German court said on the 5th of May, in response to what's known as the ECJ vice judgment, that by operating quantitative easing in the way it has done in the past, the European Central Bank has already broken EU treaty law, and that the European Court of Justice has acted beyond its treaty powers by supporting the ECB. With the worry for the Germans being that they might end up having to underwrite all the Eurozone countries' debts. Therefore, say the German judges, we can withdraw the support of the powerful German central bank from the ECB, which could pull the rug out from under the Eurozone and the European Union. So making any future bailout of Italy nigh on impossible. The basic problem is that Italy wants grants, and the Germans want the Italians to have loans to pay back. But the Italians are not going to be happy unless the wealthy countries like Germany hand over their money, as the only other alternative would be for Italy to keep borrowing and face a huge pile of debt equating to north of 155% of GDP, along with the eye-watering interest payments that come with it. And the Germans will not be happy if they have to hand the dosh over for free. In fact, they would deem it illegal to do so. And when even the BBC is reporting that Italy is now doubting its position in the EU, you do have to wonder how close an Italexit actually is. Now, many people hearing about the spat between the German Constitutional Court and the ECJ will simply say that the EU is supreme, so the Germans will just have to do as they are told. But it turns out that things are not quite that simple. As the German courts point out, the European Union is a union in name only. It is not a federal state. And it goes further and says that it is the EU member states that are the masters of the treaties, not the EU. So their view is that the EU is just the result of another set of international treaties that places obligations on the nation states, but, very importantly, also places limitations on the various EU organisations, like the European Central Bank and the European Court of Justice. Roughly what's happening is that the European Central Bank is buying a lot of Italian bonds at the moment. Some say in the region of 40% of all ECB bond purchases are for Italian bonds. And, as the ECB buys them so readily, it has the effect of keeping the prices of Italian bonds up and their yields down. That is, it keeps a lid on Italy's borrowing costs, which in effect is bailing Italy out. And that is something that is forbidden by EU law. So it should not be buying those Italian bonds in such scale. and the ECJ, when a similar matter regarding bond purchases after the credit crunch was brought before the EU judges, they should have used those treaty laws and ruled against the ECB. But what they appear to have done is acted like a law-making Supreme Court of a nation-state and made up new law to suit the situation and fit the EU narrative. Something that once again is not allowed under EU law. And now that the German Constitutional Court has looked at this situation and ruled that the ECB and ECJ were both acting outside the scope of the treaties, its judges are saying that Germany has the right to take action as a nation state and order the Bundesbank not to engage in any more quantitative easing. The Germans are therefore claiming that a nation-state does not surrender its sovereignty when it becomes a member of the EU, and that there are distinct boundaries to what the EU and its institutions can and cannot do. And that is something they've always quietly held to, but have never thus far had to assert. Because while everyone was buying German goods and the money kept flowing in, there was no reason for complaint. But now there is a danger that the ECJ could rule that the ECB can somehow use a financial instrument to mutualise the debts of Italy, Spain and France across the whole Eurozone, so making the German Bundesbank the lender of last resort and the German people the payer of huge non-repayable grants. Then it's all change. And right now the invisible enemy is making sure that this legal battle between the supremacy of the nation-state versus the supremacy of the European Union will be played out. And the result could be that the Eurozone and the EU either lose Italy or Germany, or maybe even both. In fact, if one went, the whole lot would go anyway. But it doesn't stop there. To achieve what Italy wants would require a more federal setup in the Eurozone, with ultimate control being passed from nation-states to Brussels. And that is something that the German Constitutional Court has said would be illegal under German law. German politicians, says the court, do not have the power to hand over control of the country to a federal body like an EU that the likes of Guy Verhofstadt would want to see. That means the Germans cannot and therefore will not ever sign up to any EU or Eurozone debt-sharing measures. And the Eurocrats are not at all happy about this, of course. They get very twitched when their power comes under question. And so the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has tried to put the German judges back in their box and has threatened to take enforcement action against Germany for being such an upstart. But get this, we now have the German court up against the German EU Commission President, with the German Chancellor Angela Merkel sat in the middle, but leaning away from her own court and towards the federalist cause. And now we hear that von der Leyen is putting together a huge €2 trillion package of loans and grants to get an EU-wide post-Covid recovery going. But to do this, she would need the agreement of the EU27, that is the EU Council, and have it voted through the EU Parliament as well. And she has, according to reports, got the support of both Angela Merkel and the French President Emmanuel Macron. So depending on how this package is put together, in Germany it looks set to be a battle between the Constitutional Court on one side and Merkel and von der Leyen on the other. Now, as I understand it, the roots of the German Constitutional Court go back to the country's reconstruction after the Second World War. It considers itself as the court that protects the people and their rights. And the vice judgment is being taken very seriously as a potential EU breaker, and not just by me. A piece by two law experts in Euronews.com says, "It may seem that the dispute is one of a technical nature in the field of monetary policy between two very powerful courts in Europe. However, this is by no means the case. the vice judgment involves an act of constitutional rebellion with potentially far-reaching consequences at many levels. And it also says, this turns the vice judgment into a technical supervisory examination of the European Court of Justice, no more, no less. And that it clears the way for the ultra vires test to become an ordinary part of the toolbox of every national court and instigates potential dissident behaviour in other member states. If Karlsruhe can defy the primacy of EU law, so can Warsaw or Budapest. And a report in the Irish Times by another legal expert, Ronan McRae, carries the sentence, far more than Brexit or an inadequate response to COVID-19, this ruling is a mortal threat to the existence of the EU as we know it. As well as, how can we have a single market function if a manufacturer does not know if the EU rules allowing the sale of its product in Portugal might be held to be illegal in Slovakia? And the author also points out that the EU is berating Poland about its new laws that stifle Polish judges and says, the door is now open for the Polish government to encourage its courts to overrule ECJ rulings seeking to protect judicial independence in Poland. In McRae's view, the EU will survive all the trials and tribulations that are currently being thrown at it. But there is a real danger that without the ability to ensure that its law is upheld in all member states, it will be a shadow of the organisation it has been. And in reaction.life, Joe Zamit Lucia says that the German court is not some sort of rogue outfit. First of all, let us be clear, he writes. The German court is not some politically controlled quango court that is out of control, as some have suggested. It is the most highly regarded institution in the largest, most powerful member state, a state that is maybe more obsessive than most about the meticulous application of the law. And the author also writes, the argument is as simple as it is explosive. The German court argues that Germany, as a member state, can only participate in EU initiatives if they fall within the boundaries of what the German government has, with democratic consent, agreed to within the treaties it has signed. If actions fall outside such mandates, then the German government does not have democratic consent to participate. The judges in effect assert that it is their role to determine whether the German government is behaving legally and within the bounds of the democratic consent of the German people, not the CJEU's. And also that the judgment digs away at the core of the EU's legal order and democratic legitimacy and cannot simply be waved away or buried under a mountain of political fudge. The torrent of anger emerging from EU institutions is best interpreted as the growls of a cornered tiger rather than legitimate indignation at a mistaken judgment. So, things are really hotting up across the European Union, and it looks like the best it can expect is to be a very weakened institution going forwards. But once that weakening dry rot sets in, I wonder if it would be at all possible to prevent the whole thing crumbling to dust over the next few years. And it could be the German Constitutional Court that gets the rot spreading by stopping the German government signing up to an EU-wide bailout. Anyway, if you want to hear more from me, please don't forget to subscribe and also press that little bell, or you won't get any notifications. And if you want to see more of me, buy a mug with my mug on it. So what do you think about all of this? Please share and comment, and thank you for watching.